Thanks, Colleen.
Okay, take care.
All right. Well, welcome, folks. We still have everybody we do. This is new technology to us here in Town Hall. I'm sure many of you have been doing this sort of thing for a long time. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is ask if there is somebody who wants to serve as chair of this meeting. This time you've actually got minutes ahead of time and you've got an agenda, so it's possible for you to do that. If you'd like to, I'm happy to not be talking tonight. I spent some time talking yesterday. Nope, we don't have any takers, huh? Henry, you don't want to serve as chair here tonight, huh?
Oh, I'm already vice chair of one other committee.
So let's walk through the agenda then. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Well, no, I'm sorry, it's a roll call. So let's just, for the record, have everybody call off their name. We are recording and everybody's on video, but if we can go, I guess in alphabetical order.
I guess that makes me Roland Benjamin.
Jonathan Daly LaBelle.
David Fonaro.
Am I
Comes
there?
next. Marcus, I'm sorry.
Okay, Susan Marcus. Don't know the alphabet.
Right. Jason Ralph and
Jason Ralph.
Henry Thayer.
Yeah.
Lauren Weinstock, I'm always at the end of the alphabet.
That's easy for you.
The end.
I know what that's like, and you're not quite there.
That's true, actually, that's true.
So the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
I was absent at the second meeting, so I will
Yes,
abstain.
I was too, so I looked at the minutes, but I can't comment on their veracity.
They look good to me.
I'll second that.
Okay, so that's a motion by Jason Ralph and a second by Jonathan LaBelle to approve the meeting minutes for the meeting. What was it? February 26th.
Wow.
No objections to that. That is a motion that has carried by unanimous consent. Correspondence and public comments. We don't have any correspondence that have come to the committee, which brings us right to the main discussion. We've just got to sort of power through tonight, guys. These two items, the calendar stuff, getting a schedule, a regular schedule, and getting a chair for the committee are just things that need to get done. We do have one other member who has indicated she should be able to be here this evening about half an hour after we start. So maybe we can put that off until you've got, you're down just one member at that point. But I really think you've got to get at least a schedule tonight. I remember from the last meeting that Kristen's concern was was it Thursdays?
Yeah, Thursday.
Thursdays with a bad night, that's correct. So Thursdays were gonna be the bad night because she's got a class she teaches, and you had come to the consensus that the fourth week in the month was probably the best week for those in attendance at that meeting. So any thoughts on a regular schedule? Typically, the boards and committees have got one meeting a month, and it's on a set day of each month, which makes life pretty,
I'm fine with any day. I'd like to do it a little bit later in the evening if possible.
Okay. Any thoughts on how late?
7:30-ish, maybe.
Or 8 o'clock.
Yeah, 8's fine.
Oh,
Wow.
how long do these meetings run? This is the first meeting I've been to, so how long do they go? Are they?
No more than 6 hours.
Jason, what? No more than 6 hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is less funny today than it was yesterday. Um, So there hasn't really been a substantive meeting so far, Susan. I think it's hard to gauge how long they're going to be, but I think typically you see board and committee meetings going between an hour and 2.
Right.
And I think that's sort of a reasonable expectation for this committee as well.
Okay, then I'd say no later than 8.
Yeah.
And 8 is kind of late.
Yeah, maybe split it at 7. I'd lean toward the early end, but
7:30.
30.
And then I have board meetings on the Wednesday and Thursday nights, but not they're once a month meetings. And I think they're the second Wednesday, third Thursdays. So if we're talking about the 4th week, that's fine with me. A
Okay.
day in the 4th week would be all right with me.
So other than Kristen having a class for the remainder of the semester, the Tuesday seems good. She just can't do it at 6 o'clock. So if you're moving to 7:30 on Tuesday in the 4th week, you may have a consensus here. We'll have to wait and confirm that, but I think you're getting close.
Okay.
So what do you think?
How about Tuesday in the 1st week of the month?
We had a conflict with the planning board, I believe.
Oh, yeah, quite likely, yes, right.
All right, so 7 or 7:30?
I like 7:30, Rob.
7.
So I would suggest that we wait until we get Kristen in the room, and then you have a vote on whether it's going to be 7:30. But Tuesday, the last week of the month, seems to be a likely target.
Okay.
Any other issues or challenges around that?
Nope.
Okay. So the next item was this mission of the committee. There is a mission that was posted with the charge or the original discussion of what this committee was going to be about. And you guys have talked about it a couple of times now at prior meetings. I guess this is there because this was one of the items, and I wasn't in the room when you guys had this discussion, so I'm not sure exactly what the tenor of that discussion was in the room. I mean, I did listen to the tape, but I don't have a real good sense of, this was sort of in the wrap up. This is one of the things we want to have on the agenda for this meeting. Is there any particular thing about mission that we're looking to solidify? There seemed to be a lot of discussion about wanting to memorialize or encapsulate this idea that this is a neutral party, I guess. So is this the same concept? Are we working with mission in terms of defining its relationship to policymakers? What is this mission question?
It was a question of where projects that we deal with come from. Are they coming from the council, and is it our responsibility to present topics to the council for prioritization and approval that this is what we should be doing, and how do we go about doing that? That was pretty much the question. How do topics come to us to get onto our agenda?
So one of the nice things about this technology is that it does allow us to do group editing very easily. If it's important to get this down in a single statement, a mission statement that you want to adopt as your own, we can certainly spend some time crafting a mission statement. We can spend some time writing down exactly what it is you want to publish to the world as your interpretation of the council objective of the group, which was to provide data analysis and data gap filling. I'm missing the right word in that, but it was to identify data gaps and do analyses that will be beneficial in understanding conditions in South Kingstown. It was essentially the mission that was tied to the original creation of the committee. So if we need to do something around restating that so that it's clear that the purpose of the group is to focus on not things, and this is coming from my recollection of your discussion, focus on things that aren't being generated by the committee, but rather are coming from the town council or from other committees, is also one of the things that you had talked about. Then we can spend some time sort of crafting what that is, if that's useful. Is that worth a conversation? Is it worth trying to capture in a Word document? It's not a two-page statement. This is perhaps a paragraph, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be worthwhile just getting down so that we know what we're doing. There was question as to whether if we waited for town council to give us things to do, we would be waiting a long time. So there was some question of how do we get potential topics to them for their approval or decision as to whether that's something worthwhile for us to do.
Can I ask one question? Because I think it makes sense to me to be responsive to town council requests, to requests from other committees, but I also think that requests from town hall would be relevant as well. So if there's something, Rob, that you're working on in terms of your day-to-day business at town hall that involves data analytics that we could be useful to informing your day-to-day work, I would think that that could be part of our charge as well.
Right. So we've got a classic example of where it's not coming directly from the council just because of the way these things go. On the agenda, I've asked that we talk about COVID-19, business reopening, data needs. How are we going to get our heads around what's going on out there? And we'll have that conversation later. But I agree that good assignments, if you will, come from many different places.
The statement, Rob, that you wrote when you were asking people to join, I don't know what the date of this document is. I could have checked that before I opened it, but I didn't.
Do you want to share that? You can share your screen if you'd like,
share,
Susan.
yes, I can share my screen. One moment.
You go to, yep, there you go.
But I don't see it.
Drag to the bottom, there's a share box with a green.
Yep. Oh, don't look at everything on my screen. Here we go. Can you read it? I could make it.
Yep.
So this is what you had said when you invited us to participate.
Right. And this is essentially the charge that the town council adopted.
Okay. So it does say, to the point that Jason raised and Lauren commented on, it says producing empirically based advisory reports for the town council on all matters referred to it by the town council. We could maybe make that a little clearer, but I think we're mostly working for town hall. I agree that I
agree with that too.
This has come primarily from you as an issue where you feel, as I understand it, you feel you need some empirical evidence and the analytical work that would support some directions that the town might want to consider. It's not for us to decide what those should be, but I think it might be for us to decide to shape those and to support that in some way. So I think we're mostly working for you, but maybe we can't say that. Oh.
So I do think there's room for a committee statement of purpose and intent relative to that fits it, that's embedded in this, because I do think that there's enough leeway in here for you to really do based on almost anything, anybody's suggestion. You're charged with identifying data and information that explains local social and economic conditions, identifying data gaps, not because the council is telling you to identify data gaps with a particular thing, but because you have the general charge to identify data gaps. Evaluating statistical reports. If there's a particular report that the council asked you to evaluate, it would certainly be within your charge to do that. But I don't think that you're prohibited from evaluating a statistical report that they hadn't specifically asked about. I think that your charge is broad enough there to let you do an evaluation that you think is important and pertinent. Conducting research projects, again, I think that that's wide enough. Your general charge is to conduct research, not necessarily just those research projects that have been specifically allocated or assigned to you by the town council. So I think that this is broad enough that if you're uncomfortable with this breadth, you should say something about how you're going to interpret and work with this broad charge.
So I'm comfortable with the breadth of it, if I can speak. From my recollection, Kristen was less comfortable with it, and so maybe we should wait until she's here to get her opinion.
Okay.
This week as well. She was
That's
a little
good.
bit more outspoken than most about wanting to keep it to what the town council requested that we do. So I feel more comfortable waiting for her to have this conversation.
That's good. And again, I don't think that there's, anything inconsistent with talking about what you think this means. I mean, defining, your interpretation is helpful. It just helps guide your work. And there probably are some things you don't want to do. You probably don't want to start doing all sorts of bicycle and pedestrian analyses. Because I'll tell you, the bike ped folks are doing them like crazy, and you'd end up competing with a committee that's very competent in that area. So I'm going to ask you, Susan, to share this when Kristen comes back, and we'll start that conversation.
Okay.
Meanwhile, since we've got some time before she does get here, let's go back to our agenda and talk about coordination with other committees, which is a related topic, but is broader than just how do we define our work. What was the thought around coordination with other committees? Was it really just sort of talking to them about their data needs? Maybe it is that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee needs help in something. I mean, I will tell you, their stuff it's crazy, but they probably do have things that they're not doing that they might want some help. Is that the thought, is we're going to ask folks if they need help, or is it sort of getting doing a poll of committees and finding out what the data gaps are?
Can I just interrupt and ask, does anybody know where that sound is coming from? Am I the only one who hears it?
I hear it.
I hear it.
Kristen, welcome.
Oh,
Sorry, we didn't see you there for a minute. Hope I didn't
Actually had a
have-
lot of trouble getting in. I don't know why. I use Zoom a lot, but it wouldn't let me in for a while. So
Well, you've come at a great time. We've decided to defer a conversation on two topics because we wanted to make sure that you could participate. Do we want to?
that means I've been a thorn in everyone's side.
Exactly. Perfect. Do we want to go back and talk about committee governance, or do you want to start with the mission of the committee exercise, folks?
Well, we have Susan share what we were looking at just now.
Okay.
okay, and I would just like to say, since it might be good to have an early win in this, we could also get her view on the regular time for the meeting.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That one's easy.
Yeah, that's
Kristen,
easy. Why don't we do that first?
Kristen, while we've got you, the time of the meeting has been sort of narrowed down to Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday of the month, at either 7 or 7:30. Does that work for you?
Sure. I mean, the semester ended today, so that was my major constraint. I am teaching at night next semester, but that's a ways off, so.
So is 7 or 7:30 better?
I mean, I'd rather do 7, but that's because we get up in our house when it's getting light, because I have a small person who decides to do that. So 7:30 gets pretty late.
Okay, so why don't we just do a quick poll, and you're going to put this to a vote. Can I get a motion from someone to set the time and date a day for these meetings, regular meetings of the Statistical Modeling and Analytical Research Tools Committee will be the fourth Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock. Can I get that motion?
I'll make the motion, Bob, that the Statistical Modeling Committee meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m.
And can I get a second
Second.
to that?
Second.
I'll second.
Hold on, Benjamin. All right, and any discussion or concerns about that?
I'm just looking at one thing really quickly, because I'm catching up here. I don't have any trouble over the summer. I just want to make sure my fall is not going to be. Quickly. So I do teach Tuesday nights in the fall, so I will not be able to do that beginning in September. But I can do it for now.
So I'd prefer not to send you down a path that's going to require you to change dates mid-year, because that's just going to mess things up.
Yeah, I
So-
teach 5 to 8 Tuesday nights all next semester.
What,
Are there-
is that the only night you teach?
It is the only night I teach.
Okay, shall we move it to Thursday night?
The fourth Thursday of the month at 7
Fourth
o'clock?
Thursday at 7 o'clock?
That's a possibility, yeah.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine.
So Hank, if I could get you to withdraw your previous motion,
Okay, I rescind
And
my
if you-
previous motion, Bob.
and you can offer a new motion for Thursday at 7 o'clock.
And I make a motion for the SMART Committee to meet on the fourth Thursday of the month at 7 p.m.
And is there a second to that?
Second.
Very good. Any concerns about Thursday at 7? All right, and then by unanimous consent, that is your regular schedule. The fourth Thursday at 7 o'clock. Hey, congratulations. You're right, Susan, an early win.
An early win. Okay, so now, is this on my screen? Is it still, can you see it now?
No, you're gonna have to share again.
Okay.
So Kristen, this is the item on the agenda dealing with mission of the committee. And we had some discussion.
Do you see it? It seems to be, oh, sorry.
Here we
There
go.
you go.
So
There it is.
Susan's a wonderful archivist and has pulled up a copy of the mission statement that was, or an early version of the mission statement, but it's essentially the same as what was adopted by the town council, outlining what the council said it wanted the committee to do. So in the last couple of meetings, there's been some discussion around the topic of how tight to assignment and direction from the council should this committee read its purpose. And my read of the charge is that I think you've got a lot of leeway. The charge the SMART committee is charged with, and then it's a bullet list of very broad things, verbs that you guys can engage in. I think you don't have a whole lot of limitation here, but I know from listening to the tapes of the tape of the last meeting that there's some concern about not having too much rope to get tangled up in. I think that's a fair point. So we had started a conversation tonight about what the one paragraph explanation of your interpretation of this mission and sort of your the committees of what tools are going to use to keep from getting tangled up in too much rope, I suppose, is a fair way of putting it. So,
So my concern last time was that the previous meeting, we had been particularly clear about having a consultative function rather than an agenda setting function.
right.
And so my concern is that absent some sort of process to topics, that we are not serving in a consultative function, but instead would be serving in the setting function. So for example, without a formal process to evaluate topics that we would be considering, that choice would be inherently driven by the interests of the committee members. And so it's not necessarily in, it really, that concern stemmed more from the initial conversation we had about the scope and role and process of the committee rather than from this document.
Right.
But I will say, an advisory committee does suggest that what our role is not to take things up and decide on our own, but instead evaluate issues that are before the town council.
Right.
So, I mean, again, my concern stemmed directly from a conversation that we had in our initial meeting where we were concerned about retaining and maintaining an apolitical role rather than having the agendas of individual committee members drive the function of the committee. Because certainly if we are talking about adopting a governance structure, that really does change the role of a chair and the organization of the committee in terms of what topics we'd evaluate and why. And so given that there were a significant number of absences in the last meeting, I thought it was important to revisit that particular concern from our initial meeting.
Yeah.
That's certainly not intending to stymie the process or the role of the committee in doing work. But just to raise the concern that if we are dictating our own course of action, in terms of individuals saying, I brought this, let's look at it, that might not be in accordance with the process that we discussed in the first committee meeting.
Right. I think those are all, that is a correct representation of my recollection of the first meeting as well. It's what I heard happen and discussed during the first meeting. I think you're right. The neutrality, the non-agenda setting piece did seem to be a consensus point at the first meeting. So I think that's an important concept for us to capture. The charge itself does not do that. So I think that there does need to be some statement by the committee of how it's going to operate. Maybe it's not a mission statement, but it's an operating statement. You know, our operating principles are these, and, you know, maybe it's 4 bulleted items. Maybe, you know, we engage in research or engage in projects when requested by, who are they? Who are your customers at that point? Is it town hall? Is it the town council? Well, it's clearly the town council, but is there, or local officials? I mean, is it that broad? Town hall, other committees, and other public officials who work for the municipality, school district. That's about all we've got. Maybe housing authority. Is that a helpful way to bound the work, and try to avoid being in the agenda setting role because you've identified your customers for whom you work, who you're consulting for or to, right?
I feel that we should be responsive to the town needs and to function as a committee to advise on matters that pertain to town operations. So just to said, and also to you, Rob, I would agree with, I think any of those people or entities would be our customers, and that that we could do a lot of helpful work to support the roles of, you know, whether it's the recreation, you know, people or housing
Right.
authority or something that you're working on in town hall as a project, and certainly from town council, school committee, or other committees in the town, I just want to say I think that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. It never even occurred to me that the agenda might be set by the committee members. No, it seems to me we're here to answer to the town, not the, yeah, to the municipality for some set of issues that are defined. I'm a little worried that it's a very big audience and that it could be that we don't have the capacity to address all of the things that might come at us. And so maybe we need, in terms of not getting caught up in ropes, to be a little bit more specific, but I don't think it matters at this point. I think we should have some ability to say that's not something we feel we can do. Either we don't have the expertise or we don't have the time or any sort of wherewithal to address what we're asked to do. I think we should have the right to decline. But otherwise, I think, as long as we're doing something that is related to an issue that's important to the town, I think it should be fun. So I think it could be without listing all those different things, although maybe that would be helpful.
List in the original charge.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I sort of like Lauren's simple statement of, doing things for the town.
Mhm.
But if that's not clear enough, maybe it needs a little further language. I don't know.
I think my concern last time was the process by which we determined that. Was it because we thought it was important to the town, or if it was an issue that particular town committees or the town council was grappling with? And where I had some reservations was where we were selecting what we thought was important versus issues that were salient and arising and under consideration.
Right. So Kristen, can that unease or the source of that unease be summarized as you didn't know who the customer was?
Or even why we were talking about something, right? We need to have some sort of process as a committee, instead of deciding that we are going to just talk about something because it's brought forward. We need a vetting process for what we are doing. So
Maybe this comes down to one sentence. What about as an operating principle, the Statistical Modeling and Analytical Research Tools Committee acts on requests by town and school officials? Done.
That is what I was hoping for. I just didn't want it to be our own requests, right? Because then it does not, it is no longer a committee that's functioning in a support role, but instead it's got its own.
Yep.
Okay, but that doesn't address.
My only concern.
That doesn't address Kirsten's process question, because we could get 4 requests on
Right.
Monday, and we would have to determine which of those 4 requests we were capable of addressing. So we'd still need to have some vetting process.
Right. So there's one model that says you deal with it as a consulting firm would. You look at the request, you look at the potential client, and you decide whether or not you've got a right match there. Have we got the expertise? Have we got the interest? Have we got a good client? I mean, if it looks like I don't want to, be too harsh, but if it looks like the client's asking an unreasonable question or a question that really isn't going to have a satisfactory answer, the best thing you can do is explain that to the potential client and show them the door, right? But you've got the potential to just do that as a committee. Every request is put on the table, every request is discussed, and then as a group you decide whether or not it's a project you take on.
My real concern was the origin of the request before. So I do agree that I think that those are two separate issues. I just didn't want us to decide to generate our own agenda. That was my concern.
Yep. I think the who you work for, who the potential client universe is easy. You know,
Yeah.
with town and school officials, done. I mean, at that point, it is the rec commission, it is the bicycle pedestrian committee, it's anybody who's doing town or school work. It could be the school committee, it could be the environment subcommittee of the school committee, it could be anybody who's doing town or school work. That's your universe. And then the process, the selection process, I've just described one, Susan, there may be others that.
I would just add to this, I mean, it maybe takes it in a slightly different direction, but in terms of this list of activities that we'd be engaging in, just to state the obvious, that conducting research costs money. As somebody who spends all of her time professionally conducting research, and I have millions of dollars in grant money to support that work, I think we need to be realistic about the types of requests we can respond to. Certainly pooling data that are available to us and running an analysis and working together to interpret the data is one thing. It's another thing to build a research study from the ground up and collect our own new data and run a research project.
I'm really glad you said that, because I thought this was, yeah.
I have a big concern about that because as far as I know, we don't have a budget for our committee.
Right.
And that's fine. That limits what we can and can't do.
I also think that perhaps we could simply offer some context into what resources would be necessary to obtain some of that information, because I think that if you're not steeped in the realities of research and cost, that sometimes people will just think that you can go run a survey, right? And you'll have your answer. And so even providing guidance in terms of what would be required to adequately answer a question sometimes might be useful as well.
And that is the kind of function that we're missing in municipal government. The council hears from somebody that they need a survey, but no group has vetted whether or not that's a reasonable thing to conduct a survey on. So that role is something that this committee certainly could be doing.
And there's a whole science on survey design,
Sure,
which is worth making clear in this committee, because there have been surveys that have gone
yes.
around town that could have been more robust, I'll say.
I have participated in some of those surveys. I'd agree quite completely.
We acknowledge that. We don't have the budget either.
Could I can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, David.
Okay, I wasn't sure if my audio was working or not. I could hear you, but I wasn't sure if you could hear me. I pretty much agree with everything that's been said, and I understand all of Kristen's concerns about us, not driving an agenda. The only thing I'd add is that I don't think it should be out of bounds if we see an area that we think could benefit from data analysis to suggest it to the town council. And if they agree that they think it's worthwhile to study, they could, then turn around and ask us to do so. I guess it's just a slight modification on the approach that's sort of been suggested to now.
Yeah. So to use sort of an attorney-client relationship analogy, with your long-standing clients, when you see an opportunity, you go to them and you let them know about it. That's for sure. I never, go looking for somebody you can't solicit to sell a particular real estate deal to. But if I hear about one and I've got a client who matches the profile, I'm going to bring it to them. So yeah, I think your relationship to the council is unique in that regard. I don't think you'd want to be doing that with the bicycle committee or the recreation committee necessarily, but you go directly to the council, and they would, if they thought you're right, talk to the recreation committee about the idea that impacts their work.
one thing that I noticed in the committee that predated this committee that I sat on for a while until it lost a quorum, is that there's not a whole lot. Well, I didn't think clearly enough before I started. There's not a lot of data we have to draw on. We have a pretty small puddle of stuff that we can easily grasp in order to begin to ask and answer some questions. And so I think we need to be modest in addressing, in explaining what it is that we can and can't do. And I think one of the first things we ought to do, and one of the things we were starting to do in that other committee, was look around to see what is collected, what the town does have, what you know, the age, the length of those bodies of data, you know, we're just sort of what it is we have, so that we could begin to make some reasonable determinations about the kinds of questions we can address. And I think we could be helpful to the town. I saw this pretty clearly. We could be helpful to the town by suggesting that some other data points should be collected. And, you know, we could help sort of define what those might be. And I don't know. So there's the whole question of what we have to work from, which I don't think is terribly deep.
I think that's right. But I think these two sort of guiding principles are very good. You've got your customers identified, and you've got how you act on what your customers need identified. They come to you, and they is a defined universe. That's how your agenda is set. You then have to decide which ones of those projects are worth doing or can be done or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob, you can always tweak it, you know?
Okay. Yes, I mean, yes. You can always modify things as you go. All right, so that's helpful. I think you've got a mission for the committee, or a mission statement that I can sort of work with from this recording, and I'll try to get something back that is a 1-paragraph statement that you can publish to the council and to the town departments and town committees, and start hopefully generating some requests.
Do you want me to send you my document, or do you think you can find this in your own files?
I have it somewhere, but I think I'm just going to use this conversation to write up a 1-paragraph statement.
Okay.
I think it's going to be easy enough to do that.
Okay.
Bob, do we need a motion?
I think you're okay, because you haven't really got that statement yet. This has been a conversation that I'll summarize, and then you'll have a statement at the next meeting.
Okay, fine.
So now we get to the question of committee structure. How do you want to organize yourselves? You need somebody to run your meetings. So, other than that, you know, you can design this any way you want it. It can be a very collaborative group. Everything can be done by consensus. Since I think Kristen's point that the typical role of the chairman in setting the agenda is probably not appropriate here. You have already laid out a very consensus-oriented view of how the committee should select projects and conduct it. So the committee's or the chair's role here could simply be to run meetings, just simply to make sure that the meeting starts on time, that the recorder is recording, and that the moment at which the meeting is then recorded, that kind of thing. I'm only suggesting that because it's some feedback on what I've heard. It's your committee. You get to decide. I'm going to shut up.
I can say I'm too old.
I'm too disorganized.
I think I would suggest that maybe we could do a rotating chair. Somebody could serve for 2 or 3 meetings and pass the baton to somebody else and share the responsibility, since we're talking about consensus anyways.
You could do it. We've got one committee in town that has got co-chairs, and they seem to pull it off pretty well. It's actually helpful because when one can't attend a meeting, there's someone else there who can sort of fill the role, and they get used to some parliamentary procedure, which is a necessary part of complying with the state open meetings act. It's not a big deal, but there's some sort of routine that should be built into the meeting. So that is a model that we've got. It's not, it's unheard of. Any volunteers for?
Don't all raise your hand at once. Well, I just like to say that maybe we don't need to pronounce who's going to be a chair. Maybe we just need somebody to be willing to run the next couple of meetings. Well, I mean, I don't know. I know a couple of you a little bit, but I don't really have any sense of what you're bringing to this committee. And I think a chair would sort of want to know that. But if it's just really a question of, starting the meeting on time and ending it on time, then I'd say, Rob, you could keep doing that until we learn who we are a little more. And then we
but you're missing the main role of the chairperson, which is to hassle me to make sure the meeting minutes get out.
Well, I don't know. I've in my 3/4 of a century, I've just chaired enough committees. I'm not putting my hand up.
It's not a terrible lift, but it does require somebody to sort of just make sure the meeting starts on time and checked in, at some point a couple of days before the meeting to make sure that, things are on track.
Well, and who sets even a pretty rudimentary agenda? That would be done by the person who runs the meeting too.
It could be meeting agendas for our town committees and typically are done by staff with input from the chair.
That's true.
But there's definitely input. I mean, the items that have to be on there because that's what has come to their attention is typically done. But that again is that agenda setting role that we're sort of hoping that we're seeing done by requests rather than by the direction of a chair.
Yeah, but you still have to be able to say for the agenda we have a request from this or we have a request from that, and that's the agenda is going to be shaped by this request. We're going to talk about this one first and that one second. Okay, we're stuck on this point. May I suggest we move on to the discussion of COVID-19 and come back to this before we end? You don't have any volunteers.
So that's fine. I will suggest this. On the administrative stuff, we can take on the commitment. I can make sure that the meeting minutes get out on time and all that sort of thing. What I'd really prefer though is that I not be running, that I not be sort of the center of your meetings. I don't think that's a healthy dynamic for the committee. I'd much rather have somebody volunteer to run each meeting. And so long as you all are willing to commit to running a meeting, each of you in turn or something, I think you're fine. We can probably get away with not having a traditional chair. We just have to have the lead member for each meeting. Just identify somebody who's going to orchestrate the conversation. All right, so let's go to COVID-19. This is a request, a bona fide request. And it is a huge need right now. We are starting to hear from the governor's office that they are going to reopen the economy. It's a very strange concept to me that we've got government's talking about reopening the economy, what we're really talking about is trying to figure out how to be less restrictive in the way businesses operate. But we're going to be doing that. We also are trying to manage the damage that's been done from the last months with the basically stopping business. And we don't have very good data. We know the national unemployment data. We've got numbers from the state unemployment data. But I don't know of any source of local South Kingstown unemployment figures. I've asked the state for that information. I don't know if it's going to be easy to get our hands on. We don't have an easy way to know what the bankruptcy rate is for local firms. You know, the bankruptcy court up in Providence has got those by address, but we're not going to have an easy way to figure out what bankruptcy filings there are here in town. We'll get it anecdotally over time, but we're not going to have a nice, clean, count of bankruptcy filings. We don't have any good way to know. We're having some conversations with local businesses, but we don't have any real good way to know what the decline in revenues for the hotel industry are in town. We've got 3 national brand hotels. I've gotten reports from those guys, and I have no reason to believe that the reports are not true, but it's, again, it's anecdotal reports. By the way, that number is 2% of revenues. They're operating on 2% of revenues is what they're saying. That's pretty miserable, but how's that compared to other communities, and what are they doing that's different would be an interesting thing to know. So all of this is sort of, we need to understand how bad it is, and we need to understand how to begin to make it better.
And do we have,
Can I make a comment on that? I don't.
Sure.
Some of the things, those are numbers that will be available and maybe not even real time enough to make any actionable decisions on. I think everybody can say, we know it's bad economically. Is there decisions the town is making to change that, or do we have other rules? I was on the business meeting, that meeting with business owners that you had, and it seemed a little more like the town's role at whatever reopening looks like is going to be a little. It was stated that it would be a little more towards enforcement of whatever restrictions would remain in place as the opening occurred, or monitoring things that I don't know. I don't know if trying to gauge an economic impact from this is helpful yet, because the data isn't there, but really things like what is the load at the hospital? These are these metrics that are out there that are guiding some of the phased approach that the governor's talked about. And then where's the town's role in that process?
Right.
Is there even one? I mean, simple things like when does our state of emergency get lifted? Like what is the metric that defines that?
Right.
Those to me are those the actual decisions the town is making, not just an awareness of the climate. So
yeah, so we're trying, and in fact, one of the things that the council did last night was to establish, or tell me to go establish, an ad hoc committee of local businesses who can provide some insights into what we can do as a community, what we can do as a municipal government to make it possible for business to continue operating in a horrible summer. And the model that the concept that I'm working with is save the summer. What can we do as a municipality to save the summer, to make it not a complete washout? Is there some way for us to support restaurants and bars, despite the fact that they're only going to be able to have 50 or 25% of the number of people in their building in their dining rooms as they had pre-COVID. So that's one area that we're beginning to focus on. We do have real estate. We've got a lot of real estate, and in summer it's warm enough to be outdoors doing real estate. So we are talking to a local builder, and we're talking to the Recreation Commission about putting a large number of picnic tables in our parks. Saugatucket Park, the park at Marina Park, down at the town beach, assigning a number to those park bench or those picnic tables, and allowing people to reserve the picnic table, order from local restaurants, and have the food delivered to that picnic table in the park. That may work. We've got Kenny Tetzner, who's a local restaurateur, looking into the logistics of, there's an app that I don't use, but Table Out or Table Up or something like that. There's an online reservation system that restaurants already use. The trick is making sure that we are ready for people to start using tables, and they're not going to get deliveries screwed up, and we're not going to have people crashing the area that's been designated for reservations, that kind of thing. All of that policing has got to sort of be worked through.
So that's kind of what I'm getting, like whether or not that's for this committee, how do we input? Like, do we say, evaluate the plans for any spacing that might be there, or do we sit there and just determine what kind, or recommend or sanction any kind of numbers that might be appropriate for that? I don't know. I'm trying to think of our role in that, and whether the town is really, how far
So part of,
Rob, I'd like to say something.
yes,
I think
please.
this topic's in EDC's swim lane. I don't think it's in this committee swim lane. Because everything you talked about so far as these businesses are concerned, Larry, of all people, has got his ear to the ground on every one of these businesses. And
Right.
his relationships with the Chamber of Commerce, the Wakefield Committee. So this topic of how we're going to recover from the COVID-19 should be in EDC's swim lane. And I mean, and we should have a meeting next week about it.
Yes, and it's on the agenda for the EDC next week. I want to be careful though, Henry. I wasn't suggesting that this committee should be helping us figure out how to put picnic tables in parks, responding to the question, what is it that the town is doing? And I respond to that question because what I think we need to do is figure out how to inform the things we're doing with data, and to ask questions about what data are being generated. So for example, if we've got a reservation system, I potentially have a tracking system.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. What about that should we be doing, if anything?
Yeah. You do have by de facto a COVID tracking system.
Only if I capture the data and I have a responsible policy that allows me to use the data when we need it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
And
I think the other thing that it does let you do is look at whether or not there's, it's at capacity. If you're looking at that real-time flow and you're seeing this opportunity for expansion, that is part of saving the summer versus maybe areas where you wouldn't want to be diverting some of those resources. You can look at volume overlaid by location. And I mean, certainly you'll have to account for things like weather and other kinds of intervening factors that are likely to affect it. But I mean, there's a real opportunity there to at least marry the resource commitment with the demand, right, for those services. And that's smart to do. If you're trying to utilize and expand opportunity, it would be really sad to be at demand capacity where you could fulfill a large range of additional consumers using that service where you're not providing it. But it would be similarly foolhardy to over-enforce and over reserve and over dedicate where there's not a need for it. So I think even in terms of balancing that allocation, you have an opportunity to do some.
Okay, I have one question. We're talking about picnic tables in the park and delivery to it. Does anybody with a public health background see any potential of that coming back on us and saying, you're not practicing social distancing, shut it down?
Well, that's actually the point of the program would be to make sure that you were practicing safe social distancing. The point would be that because you can't have, hey, Jocelyn, this is actually an idea prompted by a suggestion your husband made at a recent meeting.
Right. I was in the meeting. Yeah.
So the idea here would be if you can fit 40 tables around the walking at Marina Park and they've got 25 feet between them, you've got the social distancing, especially if you've got a way to get people in and out in walking corridors that aren't going to have them stacking up on each other. And if you reserve them at the right intervals, people are vacating and coming in without running into each other. So, I mean, there's a lot of timing and logistics involved in this, but again, if the restaurateurs think they can get the software, the reservation software to do that, we'd be designing it so that you had a social distancing tool. It's design. I mean, that's the purpose.
Yeah. Now, how many people could you have at a table? Because right now we're groups no bigger than 5. She's going to go with groups no bigger than 10.
Right.
Another 2 weeks.
Right.
Fingers crossed.
So one of the interesting things about this, and I'm getting deep into the weeds on this one, and I'm sorry because we're moving away from the
Okay.
Look for data opportunities here, guys.
Yeah.
One of the things that is nice about this is it happens before the restaurant reopens happen. She's going to do parks first. So we can have restaurants operating in parks before they can operate in the 10-person restaurant reopen space. So I think the answer to your question, how many people, is whatever the number is at the time that the park ban or the park restrictions are lifted. And if it changes, if that number goes up, then you change the number.
Well, again, I think Kristen's right. I think our job would be to look at to be doing the counting, measuring how this is unfolding and advising whether it's meeting its goals or not. And everybody else will figure out which direction the people flow in and how you get the tables cleaned in between the people sitting at the tables. And that's all something for somebody else.
So what should we be talking to Table Up about? What are we looking for from the data collector?
Can I speak? I mean, I speak from the perspective of doing treatment research, but this isn't like somewhat of an intervention, right? And when you pilot a treatment, you don't just go right in and throw out hammer it over someone's head. You have to evaluate feasibility and acceptability, right? These are really important metrics. And so as we're rolling this out, I would want to know about the feasibility and acceptability of this program before we roll it out in a large scale way, and then realize there's all sorts of problems with it that we didn't anticipate. And then we're stuck because all these people are now, I'm thinking even of an example of a restaurant that gets slammed with orders. They're 45 minutes late with the food. Now there's a family waiting to eat their food, but their time at the table is running out. Those are just logistical issues in terms of the feasibility of how to do this that we need to measure upfront in a smaller scale way before we scale it up to something bigger.
Yeah,
so
that's a really important point because the restaurateurs, their businesses, they want to get out there as fast as possible, and we've got to remind them that we can't fail. We've got to do this right.
Yeah. So things just in terms of like the time it takes for these orders to get filled. How long does it take for the order to get delivered to the table? How many families are signing up for the tables? are groups of people? What are the size of the groups of people that are showing up at the tables? Are the people themselves adhering to social distancing, right? Because maybe the table fits, I don't know, 10 people, but they're trying to squeeze in 15 people at a 10-person table. We need to measure those things to make sure that this actually can work before we decide it's going to work without any data to support it.
Right.
So Rob, this reminds me of something that you said at the business meeting, which was that if we were if we opened Town Beach before any other state beaches open, we would get overwhelmed. And that's something we probably need to look out for. If we're doing something like this that no one else has thought to do, there's going to be a rush of people that want to join in. Maybe that's something we can look at the trends of how where people are coming from to reserve if there's more than just people in South Kingstown.
So if we think it's a very practical problem, let's assume for the moment that we're talking about 3 parks. I think we are actually talking about a couple of more, but let's take Town Beach, Saugatucket Park, which is adjacent to the Saugatucket River across from Pier Cleaners, and Marina Park. If those are the 3 parks that we're working with, the issue around the viability of this model are different in each of those places. The Marina Park has got a restaurant and a half that are right on the park. You've got the Java Madness and 210 Oyster Bar. 210 Oyster Bar probably does not run into many operational problems serving people across the street than they do in their patio on one side of the street. Maybe some, but it's probably fewer than trying to haul a meal up from the Matunic Oyster Bar. So that's probably a nice place to sort of test for that reason. The Saugatucket Park is more complicated. It's further from all of the restaurants that might want to, sort of capture that territory for themselves. It's the Muse, it's the Thai restaurant, it's Phil's. Those are the restaurants in the neighborhood. And then the Town Beach, pretty far from everything, including the mist, the ocean mist. The ocean mist is nearby, but it's a car ride to get a meal to a table. What do you see as things we ought to be worrying about in terms of things to count in that environment? What are our problems to look for? I think, Lauren, I've got your list. I think you've identified a lot of the things, stacking and occupancy rates, and I think that all makes sense. But are there things unique to what I've just described that are different than that? Are there other things that are going to be issues?
So I'm pretty comfortable talking about Marina Park and about the Town Beach, because I have a beach house across from the Town Beach and a boat at Marina Park. One of the things I would worry about is territorialism from restaurants. I would think that 210 Oyster Bar might begin to not be delighted at other restaurants delivering to Marina Park, because for some reason they have sort of usurped the entire park. That would be problem number 1. Over at the beach, I think Kevin would probably have a monopoly, and it's not a car ride, because it's a pretty short, a bike ride with a basket on the back would take care of that. And he's got both the restaurant at the Ocean Mist and the pizza house. Mm-hmm. So I think that he would have a little bit of a monopoly over there. I think one of the things that needs to be considered, Rob, is the personal responsibility that people need to take, and the town putting up signage, warning them that would help relieve some of the liability risk for the town. Only X number of people at each table, 60 minutes or 120 minutes or whatever people think is appropriate for table length of stay.
Right.
Don't come with your beach towels. In other words, are you going to open the beach, or are you just going to open the picnic tables? How long are you going to keep the picnic tables after social distancing is really relaxed? Is it just for town people? Is it for out of town people? On and on and on. This is big. What you're proposing is big, and it's going to require an investment on the part of the town. And also will require some kind of enforcement at some level, whether it's, police enforcement or EMS enforcement or something enforcement. But I think the personal responsibility component shouldn't be overlooked, because once she relaxes social distancing, and she will soon, I think that signage, making it explicitly clear, and there's ways to assess how many people are going. So those are my thoughts off the top.
Yep.
Having discussed it with Tom a little bit.
Those are good thoughts, and I think this is the conversation EDC is going to have next week. The signage thing, what we're sort of talking about right now is a signage campaign, sort of a placard for businesses, all businesses, that identifies the COVID safe practices that the business has committed to adhere to. Right now, we're operating with the motto 4171, a COVID safe harbor. It's sort of the latitude, longitude of the area, and this is our COVID safe harbor. This is what we do to make sure that we're complying with social distancing and masks and all the other good things that people have to do to stay safe here.
But can I just say, aren't we outside what we should be doing here? Because wouldn't we just say somebody else, the restaurateurs, the people who are running these apps, the EDC, whoever it is, they have to come up with some program, some idea, and they have to be able to sort of say what it is they want to do. And then it seems to me that our role, if we would be to advise them about some of the sets of things they probably haven't thought about, to Lauren's point, and to Kristen's point, for us to be clear what we were looking for in terms of analyzing whether this program was working out. So we don't have to think about the signage or the number of minutes or the number of people, or that's all somebody.
That's exactly right. I mean, that is an
else's
EDC
problem, and we
So
just
Henry,
we need to take whatever somebody is proposing to the town, and we should look at it, and we should decide based on what people know about running projects like this, whether this is a good idea or not. Which, of course, if we say it isn't and everybody's all gung-ho about it, that'll be a problem. But anyway, I think I don't think we have to spend time worrying about the signs or.
you're right. I mean, at some level, the legality and the liability and all that stuff is, it's my job. It's the town solicitor's job. We've got that. This committee's job is to help us figure out what we need to count to keep from tripping up.
Yeah.
And what we need to design to make sure that we don't have an experiment that's going to fail. I think
Yeah.
that's
Right.
That's
And it's utilization and capacity, right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's both the pre-structural components that Lauren's talking about, and then
Yeah.
trying to have some optimization in there so that it is not over-resourced or underutilized.
Yeah.
I
And
think
that we're
that
collecting the data that allows us to determine whether this is a successful initiative, right? Like, what are the metrics that we need to be measuring that allow us to formulate some conclusions about whether or not this was a good initiative for the and it isn't working, so to speak. And we can define and operationalize what working means. If the police have to get called in every night to break up fights at the table because people aren't vacating, that's a metric that we can measure and say, the police are getting called into this too many times and it's not worth it. Or we could measure, what kind of revenue these businesses are bringing in as a function of this that they wouldn't be bringing in otherwise. Right. Those are the kinds of, I think we just need to define some metrics in terms of what you would want to measure with something like this, and start small right? So start with those feasibility and acceptability metrics. You know, can we do it at all? Which is an important question. Before we scale it up, we need to know if we can even do this at all. And then once we pilot it, and also you can collect some metrics in the piloting to then refine the program, and you can get a lot. It's an iterative process, right? So you get the data, you then make your adjustments to the program, and then you scale it up a little bit larger, and you continue to measure whatever these outcomes are that are going to allow you to determine whether this is a good program or not for the town.
I do think that each one of us has various areas of specialty that brings a level of expertise to the table. And so I don't think that making recommendations for what might or might not be a successful program prior to initiation would be completely off the table for this particular group of individuals. I certainly think Lauren could address the discussion of social isolation and what's going to happen the minute those doors are open. I can talk about it as well. I think that the need for fresh air and sunshine and a sense of community is a critical component. If we don't take a look at that as experts on this committee and make recommendations to you that will gear this towards success, then we're going to be looking at failures and success and going, oh, I should have said something. So I think all of us have a good sense of what might create a good program. And I do think we should have some input into the design if you're going to ask us to study it. And the assumptions that I think we all can make based on what we know about role and good marketing, social determinants, health and safety determinants, mental health, community planning. I think we all have areas of expertise that should be drawn upon to help design those first few steps. So Susan, that would be my input to your comment. I do think we should have some input.
Oh yeah, I think so too, but I think not at the level of, you know, what should the signs say and things like that.
I mean, our role is really more program evaluation, right? In terms of setting the parameters, looking at feasibility from each stage. It's really not to take on the roles of the entrepreneurs in this.
Right.
We're really more in an evaluative structure.
I actually think we should have input. I'm not being argumentative, Susan. It has been a very long day, but I'm not being argumentative. I do think that the signage should in some ways come from us, because I think it should be pretty elementary, just from how I instruct patients every day. You know, I want you to do this, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that. The instructions for the public may need to be and coming from a theoretical basis of how I instruct patients in material that's foreign or different to them, or that they might not want to do, but need to do, I know needs to be very, very clear and very concise and somewhat simplistic. So I would make that recommendation that the signage from the town is clear, concise, and simplistic based on how we get the public to comply with things that they really should, but maybe really don't want to. So that would be how I would answer that. You know, that's where I come from. That's what I do. So it would be coming from my field, and I think other people have different fields and have a great deal of expertise in their fields. So that would just be my response. I think prior to measuring something, we design the very best thing we can, help design with everybody else the very best thing we can, and then start measuring from why do something half-hearted? That's my thought.
I have some quick thoughts on really just the scope, because it seems like the timing of this is also an issue. Before we even meet again as a SMART committee here, I think they're going to want to get going on this. So we might need to be saying, what are the things that say, don't do this? What things should we be measuring? And those are things clearly. Police calls to break things up late is obvious one, but also even something like, is there a queuing area that we should be monitoring to say, okay, this is happening. There's too many people waiting here, so let's do that, something like that. And I don't know that an open table or whatever apps that are out there are going to be cross whatever to it might literally mean for 2 weeks, we might need to have somebody literally looking at these parks and saying, is this okay? That's something I think that would be a trigger. And then maybe by the time we meet again, even the restaurants will start to find that this is either too overwhelming for them or such an opportunity for economic development beyond that, but to have access to these properties when we start getting away from this phased out reopening plan, then we can start saying, all right, how do we know that this is good? And maybe we can look at next month's meeting is to say, all right, what does this look like in a continuing way? For now, I think we literally have to say, what is the thing what do you need? What information do you need to allow this to start? Like, for example, tomorrow, if you wanted to, could you do this? Do you know enough information to be able to say, let's try this tomorrow? That's unrealistic, but there's something that might be there that could work. But then beyond that, what are the simple things that would say, hold off, let's trigger some enforcement action? So my thought is just a simple one, the eyeballing the number of people there. If it did open tomorrow, at a minimum, you'd want to have that functionality.
Hey, Rob.
This is going to be.
Rob, question.
Yes.
Is there anything in the town ordinances about consumption of alcohol on town property?
Yes, and obviously we're going to have to address that. I've spoken to the solicitor. It's an easy fix for us if the council wants to do this.
Okay.
So this has been great. I feel like I've gotten my free consultation.
So one thing to consider is that by the time we meet again, this is probably going to be in full swing. I mean, it's end of May. If she starts opening stuff up in 1 to 2 weeks, restaurants are going to someone's going to come up with who's going to think of this idea and start. So is there anything that we should do to prepare to collect data between now and then?
That's a good question, and that was going to be my second part. I feel like I've gotten the free consultation, and the customer's question is, what can you guys do for me in this area? And I guess it is time sensitive. I've already floated this whole concept with DRB. We've already talked to the League of Cities about it. You're right. I mean, this is going to happen. There's going to be multiple ways that this happens across the state. There's going to be small rollouts with the cafe next to the park. There's going to be larger models that take over, I imagine. This has really been a helpful list for me because I've got sort of a checklist that I need to be running when I'm talking to the business community. I guess my biggest hope is that I can tell the state that we've figured out how to do tracking using a reservation system, because I think that makes it more likely that we're going to have support from the state as we try to roll it out pretty early. I think if we've got a way to tell the state, we've got data down, we've got the reservation system that's going to tell us who the contacts were if somebody shows up at the ER. And I don't know how to describe that to the state. I mean, how am I going to tell them, how do I talk to the state about having a competent digital tracking system? And what I had asked this before, what do I ask Open Table? What do I gotta get from them in order to be able to tell the state that we've also got a tool? This isn't just we want to open up like Georgia. This is, we want to open up and we've got a smart way of doing it.
What are you going to do about Johnny and Susie that bring a picnic lunch?
So we're going to have to figure out how to exclude the non-reservation crowd, whether that's, a rope around the entire area, whether that's, and we're going to have to work with the restaurant folks, whether it's a park monitor who I'm paying, or it's the waiter who's the off-site service provider for the restaurant, is yet to be determined. I don't know. And it's,
Can you mine proprietary data from TableUp? I mean, is that a release agreement, or is that something the state's moving towards, or how can you mine personal data from an I don't know. I'm asking the question.
so I don't know a whole hell of a lot about this app. I've only heard about it. I've never used it, but it is very typical for online services to require, when you sign up for the service, your relinquishment of ownership of and all rights to the data that you produce on their system. That doesn't mean that they're going to give it to us for free, or that they're in the habit of giving it to governments for free. However, in this context, it may be a good thing for them to do. They may be able to use this as good PR. They may be, I don't know. I don't know. But
and you would have to know everybody in the party, it seems to me, as well. I mean, with Open Table, you can send your reservation to the other people you make a Open Table is not TableUp, so maybe this is useless, but Open Table says, would you like to invite the people who are joining you for dinner? So you can send your email for the 3 other people who are making your table of 4. Because otherwise, it seems to me, if you just have the reservationees, whatever that word is, information, it could be very hard to reconstruct quickly who was there and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's just one tiny little thing.
The other issue is when I'm with my girls, LA and Brooklyn, it doesn't matter whose credit card's up, it's whoever calls the app first. So if it happened that Stacy ordered last, it's her credit card that gets pinged. That's the other problem, is if there's family members that all use the app and they all have credit cards on file, the requester, the person you're ordering from, usually says, and who is this? Oh, whose card do you have? Stacy's. Oh, it's Stacy Leska, please. Because who cares? You'll buy it the next night in a family situation. So you may not know that Jocelyn and Tom were actually at Marina Park. You may think that Stacy and Silas were at Marina Park, when in fact it was Jocelyn and Tom, and we just defaulted to her credit card without thought, because that's just how we do things. So there's that too.
Still, I've got to think that if Department of Health has got a hit, they've got a person who showed up at the ER in Warwick, and they find out that this person was at Marina Park, table number 10 at 7:30 on the previous Saturday. And we've got a list of people who were also at Marina Park on Saturday at 7 o'clock or whatever it is, 7:30. That's got to be helpful.
How would you have a list are you collecting data a different way besides TableUp? Are you doing a sign in, or how would you know?
It's just the reservation data, but I've got all of the people who had reservations for that day and time.
You have enough to track people down. It's not an actual list, but it's a contact point. I mean, might be enough.
Yeah, probably would be enough.
Particularly, you may be able to, if this is something that businesses are really interested in doing, there may be some sort of additional question or things like that could be adapted. I mean, I think it's going to depend on the platform and whether or not they also share that reservation data with businesses, and whether or not the businesses are housing and downloading and retaining that data versus the app owning the data. And that's really the question I would ask, is if the businesses are retaining that, right? Or there needs to be a new portal created for the reservation space, and then it's overlaid with a reservation system from multiple restaurants. That's going to require some customization.
There's a comment.
That already. Like there are multiple airports that do that, where they deliver to tables and terminals. So this exists. It's just a different adaptation of the same technology. But that piece of it doesn't seem that problematic. It's really who owns the data repository, and if the central reservation system is tied to the location, not the restaurant, that would really eliminate some of those concerns that you're having about tracking. Think
You could require
Have to
too in the
decide it
open
well.
comment section of the app, there's at the end, any special instructions for the restaurant. You could require that the orderer, the person ordering, list all members of the party in that comment section, if that can be adapted somehow.
Yeah. Okay.
I would really have them just create the reservation system, not to the restaurant, but to the location. That's
I
going
think
to
that's
be a
right.
range of
That's
issues.
right.
I think that's right for two reasons. As an operational matter, it means that I'm not going to have the territoriality of tables that Jocelyn's worried about, because nobody owns the table. The table is first come, first serve, whichever restaurant's customer has reserved it. Helpful.
Can I just make the suggestion or the question? The reason why Peacedale Green and Old Mountain Field can't be used for, restaurants in those areas?
So Peacedale Green could be, nothing wrong with that I can think of. Old Mountain Field is operating under one of these 19th century deed restrictions that says no alcohol. Now, I got myself in trouble recently for pointing out that 19th century deed restrictions aren't worth what they were worth in the 19th century. They've been voided by the state legislature, but I'm not sure I want to have that fight on this issue.
And could I suggest that, since I'm worried that the town couldn't possibly have the capacity to do 3 of these places to start up in.
No, not at once. No, I think
okay,
that's one of the great lessons out of this conversation. We've got to do it. We've got to pilot it. We got to have.
The easy one to strike off this list is Town Beach.
Yes, I agree.
That's just my suggestion, but maybe you even need more restrictions. I don't know. Maybe 1 day a week, and I don't know. But that's all the design of the project, which I think should come to us from somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're almost biting off more than we can chew.
I think so too.
I mean, having a contact tracing system like this is something you pay someone to do. I mean, I don't know that although we are very smart, we have the experience here to develop something like that. I think tracking how many people are at a given location over time is something we could potentially gather the data and analyze. But making agreements with app developers and figuring out who owns what data, I don't think is in our charge.
Yeah, I don't think that what we've got to worry about is figuring out how to get the data for our tracking of content. I just want to be able to tell DOH and the Department of Business Regulation, this is one of the advantages. This is how they're handling it. So I think I have enough here to ask questions about how the data are handled, who owns them, what the license requirements are, so that we can describe that so DOH knows that they have a data source or might have a data source if they need it. All right, well, that's helpful. So is there anything else on this project that we think the committee can do, should be doing, might want to do over the course of the next week, 2 weeks, or month? And I'm not implying a new meeting. I'm just work outside of meetings as possible.
Well, is there any way to get data on hospital admissions on this if we're going to be charged with any kind of enforcement or monitoring that we're tracking, right? We seem to have a pretty direct relationship with the hospital. We might be able to just have a number of admissions every day. That's new to South Kingstown, rather than just rely on it's probably a couple day old data from Department of Health. Is that doable? I don't even know if they can report that to us.
We get pretty good data through our emergency medical service on admissions or presumptive cases. We get pretty good data. The numbers
would
aren't
think
great.
that's, yeah, I mean, I'm credentialed at Care New England Lifespan and the VA hospital, and I'm getting all sorts of emails with all sorts of daily data from those healthcare systems. And Lifespan sends me an email every day that shows me how many positive people are in each of their hospitals, how many are on ventilators, how many are in the ICU. I've got to imagine South County can provide those data to us. They're really straightforward. They tell us the hospital census in general. I mean, we're getting that. I get that in an email daily, and it's in like a constant contact link. It's completely not locked down. I could share it with anybody, and they could see those
Right.
data.
Well, Gina Ramondo's daily thing always has how many new cases and that's got to be counted. That's got to be, she's counting something.
Right, the data's
So,
there.
yeah, so
Right,
the data,
but by
so I-
hospital, you can get it. I mean, I'm getting it like the Miriam, Hasbro, Bradley, I could see Newport, Gateway. They even have data for Gateway, mental health. Like they're just sending it every day. So they have these data. We can get them if we feel like it would be informative to this project.
I'm at the health department pretty regularly through this. They're counting from noon to noon. So they start the count at 12:01, they collect at 11:59. So it's noon to noon. The issue in the statistics, and it's fascinating, is all of the different testing that's happening, because the tests are taking anywhere from 5 to 7 days to return, and CVS, of course, is taking 5 minutes in the parking lot, or supposedly it's 15, but it's, that same day response. So you have same day response and you have tests floating in from 5 to 7 days. So Rob, notification is going to mean notification within a time frame.
Yep.
Because it's not just going to be who was there on the 10th of the month. It's who was there between the 7th to the 12th, something like that. The patient was there on the 10th, or thereabouts. So it's going to be exposure to that person within a 14-day period. It's not. There's a lot to this, but I can tell you that the statistics are very skewed. The data is reliable in that what they have that day is what is positive, but it doesn't have a back time to it where you can say, yes, this person was exposed on Tuesday, tested a week later, we know where they were on Tuesday. It doesn't quite work that way. So that's going to be a problem. But I'm up there a lot. So if there's data that you need, you can ask me and I'll get it. But that's a recurring problem up there in contact tracing.
So Roland, what's the thought? If we let's assume we've got a data stream. Let's assume that we can get a reasonable daily count from, you're muted, I'm sorry.
I'm really just thinking of it more from the real-time data, not to say we're going to be responsible for contact tracing, whatever. There's already places for that. I'm thinking if we have 10 admissions in one day and we're usually expecting one, did something screw up somewhere where the town needs to take an action, not in a health sense, but in a just general enforcement sense.
Right. So if we see
and
a
we
spike,
might see that 2 days
assume that we
before.
have something to do with it. Yeah.
I think
That's
that's
all.
Yeah.
It's a gross metric. We're not looking at
Right.
individual level dynamics, but it is a municipal concern, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in public health, they call that surveillance, right? So they do this kind of surveillance all the time. I work in suicide prevention, and the state just got this really nice grant to do suicide surveillance in the state. So they can see daily people showing up at emergency departments for suicide related reasons. And they can show you on a figure, the calendar, and you can see like there's a big jump on this random Sunday where there's all sorts of people showing up at the ED for suicide related reasons. Then you can look and see what was going on that Saturday or that Friday right before that Sunday where that number went up. So yeah, like if it's some level of surveillance that we can do, even if it's pretty unsophisticated, because we don't have
That's
all these great
happening.
tools, but we
It's
can do some
happening.
of that.
Yeah, it's happening at the health department now. The epidemiology department is doing active surveillance on every single hospital in every single community.
Yeah, they have to be. Yeah.
So I would think that that would be an important connection, Rob, as you get ready to launch this, to let them know in the surveillance department with the epidemiologist that South Kingstown is about to launch this, whatever the concept ends up being, so that they have a hotline to you or to Amy, perhaps might be the right choice, to get that information. Oh, we just had a spike, suspend your program ASAP. But that's already happening very, very carefully at the health department. And I don't see a reason to replicate the wheel.
No.
I would think making the connectivity up in Providence would be the better thing to do as you get ready, or even in the process of launching. We're getting ready to do this. What are our numbers now? And what processes are we going to put in place for an emergency halt if necessary?
Right. You could do like a pre-post, right? You just measure what it is now, and then start to do some early measurement, and then measure what happens after you initiate the program and see if there's any noticeable change.
That may be difficult as the world opens up, because it's going to confound everything. It isn't just going to be South Kingstown opening up. It's going to be the whole state opening up. So is it us? Is it us? Or is it the mom who came down from Cranston to see her kids?
You wouldn't know that, but you could at least, you could see if there was any relationship. Well, I have one other thing to say about the places. Didn't I just read in Eco RI that Saugatucket Park got $80,000 to do some reconstruction of the fence and some other.
You did, and I was going to congratulate you. I thought that was your grant.
Oh,
no, this was Carrie's, I guess. Yeah, good.
No, I didn't. I'm not responsible for that grant.
Yeah.
But does that mean that Saugatucket Park is going to be a construction site as they replace the fence and whatever?
I don't know yet. I don't have a timetable on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I make one other recommendation? Is just, I don't want to volunteer anyone's time for anything, but we have a community member who works at the Department of Health, Jeff Hill. I don't know if you know Jeff. We work very closely with him at Brown. I didn't even know he lived in South Kingstown. I've been working with him for years.
Is he the Audubon guy?
I don't know if he's involved in the Audubon, but he does surveillance at the Department of Health. And like I said, I've worked with him for years, and it was only about a year and a half ago that we even put two and two together, that we live in the same town and our children are in the same grade in school. But Jeff is a wonderful partner, and he's very willing to help, and he has a lot of enthusiasm. So he could be a really good person to connect with locally with those connections. He works at the Department of Health. That's what he does. So I would recommend, maybe I could put you in touch with him.
That's great.
I think it would be important.
Good, thank you. David, you had something you were trying to get out.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is the contact tracing a need to happen, or is it a desire?
So I think that the reason that contact tracing is useful is because it adds to the programmatic cachet, to be honest with you. It makes it a more interesting project, and therefore more likely to not meet with bureaucratic resistance. We were doing something that was perceived of as potentially hazardous to the public health, they'd say no. And if we do something that is perceived of as potentially beneficial to the public health, the chances are they're going to say yes. So I need to make sure that when we go to the Department of Business Regulation and the Department of Health next week and say, look, we talked to you about this once and you said, yeah, that's interesting. Now here's the more fleshed out plan. Can we do this? I want to be able to tell them, these are the benefits. We really have 25 feet between the tables. We really have got a reservation system that has got it worked out. Here's where we're going to have the people walking in, and here's where the people are walking out. And by the way, we think that the reservation system may be beneficial to contact tracing if you need to do that. That's really it. It's just making sure that there's an accounting for all the benefits and potential pitfalls.
Okay.
Well, that was very helpful. I do appreciate it. What else we got on this agenda? Need for a data repository. That was one of the items that folks wanted to talk about at the end of the last meeting. Any?
So we still have the data committee's page on the website, I believe.
Yes. I haven't seen it in a long time. But
Yeah,
yes.
I'm sure it's still there. Is there a better place for it?
We've got to
more
get you
organization?
guys a web landing page. So yes, we should probably put it in a SMART committee, on a SMART committee page. I'll talk to Kayla about moving it over. We should be able to do that. That's something I can do this month. And then
Jason,
It would be nice to have a little bit more organization as well. It's basically just a Dropbox now
Yep.
that there's no like folders or anything. So just someone to just quickly go through and organize.
yeah, let me look at it again. I'd like to have sort of narrative paragraph describing what each of these links is off to as well.
Yeah.
Let me look at it. I'll take that on. We'll see what we can do. Between COVID and other stuff, this is going to be a hard thing to take care of, but let me see what I can do.
Okay.
Other one is we had scheduled to get the tax calculator tool out to everybody. I was going to talk to the people at the high school about doing some sort of visual based front for the web page on it. I started that conversation and then all hell broke loose, so it's gone nowhere. I still think that there's possibly some benefit to this tool coming up in this year because the Department of Education is still encouraging municipalities to file bond applications or program applications for facilities. And if that remains an issue, this tool could be useful. So I'm going to get that out in its current form to folks after this meeting, maybe tomorrow. And you know, if you have a look at it again, we can have a discussion about that next meeting. All right. So who is the meeting leader for the next meeting?
could do it alphabetically and that would make Roland the next leader.
There you go. I love it. Roland, you're the meeting leader. Don't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of all the admin, but you'll call the meeting to order when we gather again.
Sorry, Roland.
That's right. I'll remember that, Susan.
He doesn't carry a grudge.
All right. Thank you, folks. Have a great night.
You too.
Right.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, all. Have a great night.
Lauren, get some sleep.